Hi friends, we are on our fourth stop on our Mary Queen of Scots trail, following in her footsteps, and we are at Inchmahome Priory, where baby Mary Queen of Scots and her mother Marie de Guise fled during a time called the Rough Wooing, where Henry VIII is trying to force Scotland by military attacks to honor something called the Treaty of Greenwich, which at the heart of that is Mary being betrothed to and eventually marrying Henry VIII's son, Edward VI. It's such a beautiful day. Come on, let's go explore.
Join me as I take you to some of the world's most incredible and romantic ruins. We'll talk about the history, the people, the stories. I'm Evelyn Edwards, and this is Queen of the Castles.
Where we last left off, we were at Stirling Castle, where Mary was crowned queen at just 9 months old. If you haven't watched that episode, I will link it above here. And if you want to watch all of the old episodes and get to know Mary a little bit better, I'll put all of those in the description below. We need to go back a little bit to 1543, when Scotland officially announces that the Treaty of Greenwich is out. This treaty that would mean peace between England and Scotland and would have Mary betrothed to Henry VIII's son, Edward. Instead, Scotland decided on the old alliance with France, an alliance that went back all the way to Robert the Bruce's time. And this decision will have cascading effects for the rest of Mary's life. The political landscape after this in Scotland completely changes as well. The person who is ruling in Mary's stead, running Scotland, if you will, is a man named the Earl of Arran, and he was originally Henry VIII's guy. He was pro-England, he was pro-Protestant, and he switches sides. He becomes pro-France, pro-Catholic, and he aligns with a man named Cardinal Beaton, one of the most powerful men in the country. Also, we have somebody named the Earl of Lennox, and we need to talk about him because he's going to be important for our story. I mentioned in the Stirling Castle episode all of the men that were involved in Mary's coronation ceremony, and the Earl of Lennox was one of them. The Earl of Lennox, along with the Earl of Arran, were in line to the throne should anything happen to Mary. And they argued amongst themselves who was really next. Was it really the Earl of Arran? Was it the Earl of Lennox? One came from the male line, but it was a little disputed, and one came from the female line. Well, just after Mary's crowned queen, her mother is only about 28 years old, and so two very important nobles come forward and try to marry Marie de Guise, and the Earl of Lennox is one of them. He thinks, well, if I'm married to Marie de Guise and I'm Mary Queen of Scots' stepfather, I can oust the Earl of Arran. The Earl of Arran and the Earl of Lennox had long-standing issues. The Earl of Lennox was very, very, very upset that the Earl of Arran was regent. He was upset that everyone was fine with the fact that the Earl of Arran had switched sides, and so he tries very hard to marry Marie de Guise. When this doesn't work out, he decides to look for power elsewhere, and that elsewhere is Henry VIII. The Earl of Lennox puts himself forward to marry someone named Margaret Douglas. And Margaret Douglas was the daughter from the second marriage of Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's sister. Margaret Tudor is also Mary Queen of Scots' grandmother. The Earl of Lennox says, I will do everything I possibly can to get the terms of this treaty back on, that Edward will be married to Mary Queen of Scots. And Henry says, well, if you do that, I will let you be regent of Scotland. So now, one of the most important nobles in Scotland has switched sides as well. He used to be pro-France, and now he is very, very much pro-English. Fun facts: Henry VIII and his sixth wife, Catherine Parr, were at the marriage ceremony of Margaret Douglas and the Earl of Lennox, and Henry VIII provided the dowry. Henry may have lost Arran, but now he had Lennox, and he was ready to unleash his fury on Scotland for not sticking to the terms of the Treaty of Greenwich. And when I say his fury, I mean devastation on a grand scale. He was going to remove any and all obstacles that stood in his way to having his son be married to Mary, Queen of Scots. He was going to force Scotland to make that be so. And so in May of 1544, he sent Edward Seymour, the Earl of Hertford, specifically to Edinburgh to get the job done.
You might recognize that last name, Seymour. Edward Seymour was Henry VIII's third wife, Jane Seymour's elder brother, and he was the uncle of the future Edward VI. Henry's orders to Seymour were to, quote, "put all to fire and sword, steal everything you can from Edinburgh, then burn it and knock it down. This will always remind the Scots of their punishment for being disloyal."
Seymour wasn't able to take Edinburgh Castle, but what he did do was horrific, and he continued to make attacks into the following year. Mary was still safe at Stirling Castle and probably blissfully unaware of the insanity that was happening with the adults around her. At this time, we do get discussions that should it be necessary for Mary's safety to move her, that the best place for her would be the Highlands. Seymour gets as close as 6 miles to Stirling Castle, and it is time to move Mary. And so they do. They take her to a place called Dunkeld, which is about 30 miles north of Stirling, and it's often called the gateway to the Highlands. Seymour destroyed churches, burnt villages, lives were lost, and the 2 most powerful men in Scotland were blamed for this, and that was the Earl of Arran and Cardinal Beaton. The nobles thought that the Earl of Arran was inept and that Marie de Guise should be co-regent with the Earl of Arran. As you can imagine, an English alliance and Henry VIII in general was completely villainized, and the idea of alliance with Henry was even less popular. And people saw Marie de Guise and her connections, her family's power in France, as the key to a really strong alliance. And it seemed like safety for Scotland and freedom for Scotland to be in an alliance with France. Marie de Guise doesn't end up being co-regent at this point, but she starts to attend Parliament and she becomes much more influential. The next big things that we have happen is in 1546 we have the siege of St. Andrews and the murder of Cardinal Beaton. That deserves its whole own episode, and I promise that I will do that. But essentially, Protestants in Scotland were upset at Cardinal Beaton's policies on heresy, the execution of a man named George Wishart, and his massive, massive abuses of power. England ends up supporting the Protestant rebels, and ultimately the French military has to get involved. In January of 1547, Henry VIII dies, and in March, Francis I, the King of France, dies.
Another huge development is the birth of Francis II. After 11 years of marriage, Catherine de' Medici and Henry II of France finally have a child. And because of everything that was happening and had happened between England and Scotland, the possibility of a marriage that would seal and strengthen an alliance with France, an alliance that could help them fight back against England, was very much of interest to Scotland.
After Henry VIII dies, Edward Seymour, the Earl of Hertford, gets a brand new, shiny title. He becomes the Duke of Somerset, and he also becomes the Lord Protector of the realm of England. He decides that he is going to continue on with Henry VIII's policy of forcing Scotland into an alliance, and he sends 15,000 men north. Scotland has decided they are going to be ready for this, and the Earl of Arran assembles the largest army in Scottish history with 35,000 men. And on the 10th of September, 1547, we have the Battle of Pinkie, the last pitched battle in English and Scottish history until the Acts of Union. What a pitched battle is both sides choose the time and the place. The Scots were decimated. 10,000 lives were lost on the Scottish side, and 2,000 prisoners were taken. And on the very next day, September 11th, Mary Queen of Scots came here to Inchmahome Priory. It was the dark of night. Marie de Guise wrapped 4-year-old Mary up. They took a litter to a boat, and took a boat over here to an island on the Lake of Menteith to Inchmahome Priory. The priory was originally founded in 1238 and is about 15 miles away from Stirling. Mary would only spend 3 weeks here. As you walk around, you can almost feel Mary here. You can imagine her little footsteps exploring the forests, hearing the canons say their prayers. And there's even a story that the prior of Inchmahome Priory taught little Mary some Latin. The aftermath of the Battle of Pinkie will change Mary's life forever. It will lead her to a betrothal to the Dauphin of France, the next in line to the throne of France. It will make her leave Scotland. It will have her be educated in France, and eventually marry Francois, who will become Francis II of France. Thank you so much for joining us at Inchmahome Priory. There's such a dramatic contrast between Stirling Castle and this priory. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about Scottish history and about Mary Queen of Scots, and I hope you will follow along with us as we go on this trail. There's so much more to learn about Mary and so many more places to go. So give us a subscribe and a like on this video so that we can go more places together. Also, I want to say a huge special thank you to Historic Environment Scotland for allowing us to film here. They're such an amazing organization. I'm Evelyn Edwards, and this is Queen of the Castles.